We are fortunate here to have two center alums, both accomplished engineers in different areas of engineering. And the first is Richard Lewis, and Richard is a civil and environmental engineer, and he did the 3-2 program from the center where he got the physics degree, and then he got his engineering degree at Vanderbilt. He also has a PhD from MIT, and help me if I pronounce this right. He's the principal engineer. Is it Conestoga Rovers?
I sold my firm, so that's what it used to be, but it's not anymore.
Well, you can update us on where you're at now.
Sure, sure.
That was what the alumni office gave me, so I apologize.
That's nuts.
But he does environmental engineering. And then we also have Danny, is it Frudiger? Did I pronounce it?
It's Prediger.
Frudiger, okay.
Yeah.
He's mechanical engineering, and he also did the 3-2 program where he got the physics degree at Center and then completed his engineering degree at Vanderbilt. And he worked in the aerospace engineering field, and now he is completed his PhD at Ohio State. So there he's going to talk a little bit about their areas of engineering and their career background, advice they would have for preparing for the engineering field, and just general information about engineering. And then we'll do some question and answer. Richard drew the straw to start.
Okay, sure. No, good talking with you all today. I'm hoping to share a little bit of information that'll be useful to you. I went to engineering. I knew what engineering was, but I didn't necessarily know about changing schools and what you could do afterwards from Center at 3-2. So I'm hoping that some of the things I share with you will be maybe give you some ideas or some tips about what appeals to you or doesn't appeal to you about environmental engineering and that sort of thing. It's as important sometimes to know what you don't want to do as it is to know what you do want to do. I kind of think of this in terms of three circles. One of them is what you like to do. And I think most people, at least with what they have experience with, know what they like to do. And then there's what you're good at, and at least with what you have experience with, you know what you're good at. And really there's the third circle, there's what somebody will pay you to do. And I'm hoping today to share a little information to help maybe fill in that third circle about what you could do with engineering, and in particular environmental engineering. So I'll start just a little bit of my background. I was born in Winchester, Kentucky. I grew up for the first part of my life in Lexington, and then I moved to a place called Pilot View, Kentucky, which is outside of Winchester. Anybody from that part of the state, Winchester area? Anybody from over there? No, not so many people from Pilot View. We have one claim to fame, and I live in Fort Myers, Florida now. I have to have it shipped in, but I still get my AL8 down here, so I do have that. How many people are thinking about 3-2 engineering? Raise your hands. Anybody thinking about that right now, or is it just a possibility? Maybe. Yeah. And well, I'll try to share some information about that. One of the most important things you can do is to get some experience, to fill in that circle about what you like to do, or what somebody will pay you to do is internships. And I was fortunate. I read water meters growing up for the East Clark County Water District. And after that, I worked for a couple of engineering firms as a land surveyor and drafter. And so I kind of got a feel for what the field is. And anytime you can, even if it's shadowing for a day, even if it's just spending a little bit of time, that can make a big difference in knowing what you like to do and knowing what you don't like to do, and what you might like to pursue. And it's really important. Engineering, I was good at math and physics and that sort of stuff, but that wasn't the important part. It's all about solving problems, and I would call it creative critical thinking. And if you're a creative critical thinker, there are a lot of problems that you can solve with engineering. And so I graduated from GRC in Winchester, Kentucky, joined the 3-2 engineering program. I kind of knew that I wanted to be an engineer, at least in the 3-2 engineering program, if I did well enough. And so I joined up. I visited the different schools. You all know what the center side of the equation is like. The other side was looking at the schools. Once I'd completed my 3 years in physics degree, at that time there was Vanderbilt, Columbia University, Washington University, and University of Kentucky. And at that time it was also Georgia Tech. I don't think they're part of it anymore. So I toured each of those schools and visited and what I learned over time was I was somebody who was there for engineering and really didn't like the idea of having to take as many, Spanish in particular, was something like, why do I need this? Why do we need this? And I was just wrong. The 18-year-old brain, 19-year-old brain isn't quite ready to envision what the future has for them. Nowadays, living in South Florida, I actually have taken classes, extra classes in Spanish, just to bolster my ability to speak it. All that stuff you're learning, it seems like it might not have much to do with engineering, but I tell you what, it's been valuable my whole career. The one thing that I think is one of the main selling points for 3-2 engineering, it's all what your competition is. How many other people are out there doing the same thing as you, and how many people are you trying to compete with in a market, so to speak? Well, with 3-2 engineering, that liberal arts background, being able to present in front of people, being able to write coherently, it's huge, because most engineering schools, they put you straight through and they don't learn to write and they do not learn to present, and they learn just the math side of it, which is fine for the technical part of the job. But if you want to be manage, or if you want to have your own firm or anything like that, the other side it's a huge differentiator to have that liberal arts background. Well, in any event, the other thing I really liked about Center was the small size of the classes. It's a huge difference. Now, Vandy is going to have small class sizes. Columbia, I'm sure, does too. But the small class sizes are huge in terms of being able to learn and understand. I had Marshall Wilt modern physics class, and there were 2 of us in it at one point. And you had to, you had to put 6 questions on the board. On average, you're going to get 3 of them. So you really had to learn things. The other thing was I was a Phi Tau at Center, and that was another big part. The friends you'll make there, because you're in a small class size. There are 5 of us that get together every 5 years for the reunion. We've been doing it for, I guess, almost 30 years now, something like that. And those are some close friendships that have stayed with me my whole life. Really important stuff. So I picked Vandy because it has the rolling hills. It's a beautiful campus. It's got an urban atmosphere, but it's broader than that. It's not in the middle of a city. It felt more like where I was from. I'm from Pilot View. I'm not used to big cities and that sort of stuff at that time. So I went there. I walked in the door, and they said, if you're a Center grad, if you're coming 3-2 engineering, you have to do certain things to be accepted. But you know what? It's not a problem. You're going to get in. Everybody from Center gets in. So that was really nice to know that when you get there, hey, they think highly of you, and that's the case. They greeted me with open arms. The other thing I learned was by having almost completed a physics degree and showing up in engineering school, it was really easy. Vandy, I got, I think, a B+, and somebody apologized for giving that to me because they found out after that. So, if I only had 1 B+, I was really prepared. I was sitting around with kids who didn't understand a lot of the calculus at the same level, didn't understand things at the same depth, because I was in such small classes. You kind of had to understand stuff. I sat in classes where they said, do we have to know stuff from last semester? They made me go back and take statics and dynamics, which is basically first year physics or something. And I was heading into what would have been my senior year. It just set me up, and it gave the professors had a certain opinion because I did really well at these basic classes. But I almost had a physics degree at that point. Blocks sliding down planes were not a problem. So that it made it easier. And Vanderbilt was a pretty easy school to go to after that because of the basis I had. Then I got my master's and my PhD. A couple of the professors at Vanderbilt went to MIT, and for whatever reason, they maybe some of this about having a good background and all that, and speaking skills and being able to write, it differentiated me even there, I think. And they said, hey, you should apply to these grad schools. I was going to go to grad school. You should think about shooting the moon and go for MIT. And my response was, what's MIT? I've never heard of it before. And they said, you should apply for this. And I did, and I got in. I got in on a full ride fellowship. I didn't have to have there were 2 fellowships that year for MIT Masters. And you didn't have to do research assistantship, any of that. They let you kind of go at your own pace in terms of you just took classes, basically. And I looked at ways to look at water for pathogens, things that cause disease, specifically for third world countries, using DNA and RNA. I worked in the Division of Toxicology, Division of Comparative Medicine, and Environmental Engineering. And I used a filter to filter out viruses. And I use looking at DNA PCR. It's a way to detect viruses in the environment. and find out if water, maybe after flooding or in a third world country, something where they don't know if the water's safe or not, this would be a fast way to look at a broad range of pathogens. And it took me 2 years to get the master's, 4 years to get the PhD, and it was great. I love being at MIT. It was a really collegial environment. The other thing I really liked was I was around smart people, and that's a dangerous term, smart people, because I don't think smart has much to do with it. I liken it to a roller coaster. If you've ever been on a roller coaster, the only criterion that you have to have for the roller coaster is be taller than the sign. I think being smart's like that. You have to be smart enough, taller than the sign, but after that, smart doesn't make any difference. It's more about passion and level of effort. And passion first, and then you get the level of effort from the passion. I was around so many passionate people who just were excited about what they're doing, and how humble a lot of people were. I learned a lot at MIT about where I stood in the pecking order. There were a lot of smart people on the planet, but it was more about passion, and I think you'll find that over and over again. So my wife said, it's about time for you. I'd been there 6 years, and I was enjoying it quite a bit. I'd been in school since I was 6, and I was about 29, and this is a great thing. But my wife said, I was nearing 30, and we need to have some kids. You need to wrap this thing up. And so I did wrap it up. I have 2 children, a daughter who's at the University of Florida studying engineering, and a son at Center College. He's a Phi Tau too, and he's still deciding what he wants to do with some of these things. My wife and I just celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. So I had a daughter. First job I got was with an MIT grad, gave me a job. I was a senior staff, Woodward Clyde Consultants in Houston, Texas. I worked there for 1.5 years, had a daughter at about that time. And we wanted to get closer to my parents who were in Fort Myers, so we moved to Tampa. I joined a firm called HSA Engineers and Scientists. I worked there for 20 years. I was the junior most engineer when I showed up, and I was the largest individual shareholder when I left. I sold that firm about 3 years ago to a firm called Conestoga Rovers and Associates, and then they turned around. They bought our firm so that they could they were going to join with a firm called GHD. We grew it up to about 270 people. When my last day as an owner, we had 270 people. We sold the firm. I had 2 other major business partners, and they turned around and sold to a firm called GHD. They asked me to stay on as a principal in their firm to help them with the transition, and I've done that. And over the last year, I'm semi-retired now. I don't go in every day anymore, but I do a lot of stuff with my time. I teach over at the University of the Florida Gulf Coast University. I've got a class I'm teaching in hydrology and hydraulics coming up, and I really like that. I really like to teach. I like the PhD thing. I really enjoyed that. I started something called the STEM team of Southwest Florida, and we do STEM activities with K through 12 kids, and that takes a lot of my time right now. It's all volunteer, but it's really exciting. We're starting up a charter school in the county north of us. We affect probably about 5,000 kids a year with hands-on activities and getting them to this why. What do you want to do, and helping them figure out those circles. That's a lot about what we do. So in any event, the kind of high points, at HSA, I was able to grow from an engineer who did engineering, which I really enjoy, and I still enjoy. I still have 2 or 3 clients that I work with, that I've been working with for 10, 15 years. I still work with them. But some of the cool stuff was figuring things out when other people couldn't figure things out. Learning about working all over the United States and internationally and things like that. Working with people was particularly fun. Seeing people that the job that we created, my other 2 business partners, we created a job, and that let them do things in their lives. They were able to buy cars. They were able to send their kids to school. They were able to, all these neat things. And that they could have had another job for sure, but they didn't have another job. They had this job, and creating a workspace where people can grow and that's a real benefit. But you have to be able to work with people. You have to be able to write and present. And that's the Center College. It's an advantage. It's a huge advantage. Most engineers, they say an outgoing engineer is one who looks at your shoes when he's talking to you instead of his own. There's some truth to all that. And what you want to do is, I just think the skill set you pick up at Center makes you particularly good if you've got some of the technical, the other skill set, a lot of people won't necessarily have that. And I think that'll be huge. Real quick, a couple of kind of ending thoughts. If you love what you do and you're good at it, and there's somebody that needs that, what you'll find is that the money and all that comes as it's like the applause after a good performance. It's about the performance, about what you're doing and caring about what you're doing, be passionate about it. And what happens many times is money falls, but money's by far not. If you get a job that you hate or you're lousy at it, it won't be any fun, and money's not the main thing. The other thing is this concept of 10,000 hours. A lot of people have talked about it. This idea that if you're going to get 10,000 hours into something to be world class at it, and that's basically half time for 10 years or full time for 5 years, and it's with feedback. If you can't just do something, you got to get feedback at it, and clients are a great way to get feedback. But if you do that, the only way you're going to do it is to have passion about something to get that. So the hard part isn't that part. The hard part is figuring out what you have passion about. What is it that excites you? And really the only way to do that is through you get out there, job shadowing, internships, calling people and talk to them, things like this today, finding out where your passion lies. Because once you find what you really enjoy doing, and for me, it was working with people, creating jobs to where people had lives. And the other part was solving tough problems that other people couldn't solve. That's what drove me in my career. So in any event, I had a couple of last things, 2 observations. It's kind of tough losing that senior year. You go there for 3 years. My other 4 guys I hang out with from Phi Tau, they got that senior year. I didn't get that, but I got to learn about Vanderbilt, and without Vanderbilt, I don't go to MIT, and without MIT, other things don't happen. So I got to learn all about Nashville too. So that was pretty cool. Writing and presenting, I said, are very important, and you're going to be head and shoulders above kids coming through these other programs. And my 18-year-old self wasn't great at visualizing the future. I didn't necessarily understand why I had to take all these breadth courses, but they've turned out to be the more interesting part. Knowing that sort of stuff has been very valuable to me in later life. So with that, I'll stop, and I guess we'll ask questions in a little bit or whatever, but that's it in a nutshell. And I hope this will be of some value to you to understand what one possible path is through Center, but that Center really does give you some great advantages. I felt it my whole life in terms of combining engineering and the liberal arts degree. I think it's a very powerful degree.
Thank you. All right. Dan, you're up.
All right. Thanks, Richard. I kind of chuckled to myself listening to you talk about your experience, because I kind of noticed some similar things in my experience as well. So I'll just kind of start with a little bit of background about myself. I'm from Mason, Ohio, which is right by Kings Island, if anybody's ever been there. I went to St. Xavier High School in Cincinnati and graduated in 2009. And then from 2009 to 2012, that's when I attended Center. And like Richard, I was a physics major there. And then I also played baseball during my at Center. And then after that, I went on to Vanderbilt, where I was a mechanical engineer. And I was there for the 2 years as well. And played a little bit of rugby while I was at Vanderbilt. And kind of echoing just something a little bit that Richard just said, you kind of have to know. I mean, my experience was just slightly different, and it sounds like, Richard, that like a lot of people had. It sounded like the 3-2 program was pretty common when you attended Center, whereas in my experience, I don't think anybody had done the 3-2 program in several years. So when I went through with Dr. Nizer, I don't know if anybody here has had him in class yet. Yeah.
It's me.
Oh, are you back there?
I came to see you, and then I thought it was a video conference.
Yeah. How's it going? Yeah, so we kind of had to go through that experience together. It was a little bit of a learning curve for the two of us. I think he could probably confirm that. But yeah, I mean, it was a great decision on my part, and looking back on it now, and then so after I graduated from Vanderbilt, I knew that I knew I wanted to go back to graduate school, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do yet. I didn't really have a great idea of where I wanted my future to go. When I was at Vanderbilt, I took a couple aerospace classes, and so I really got an interest in that. And then after my first year at Vanderbilt, in the springs, after my spring semester there, my thermo professor came up to me towards the end of the semester and was like, "Hey, I'm going to have a research position coming up at next spring. Is that something you'd be interested in doing?" And I said, "Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I knew I wanted to go back to grad school, and I knew research is a big part of it. So I thought, I mean, what a great opportunity to get that experience as an undergraduate student." And so my last semester at Vanderbilt, I worked in the energy and nanomaterials lab, and I was part of their team working on lithium-ion batteries using silicon anodes, and just kind of examining their performance and different ways to improve the performance of the batteries. And as the undergraduate students, I was kind of more doing a lot of the grunt work. I was making the batteries in the glove box, standing there with my arms in the glove box for an hour or two. But after doing that for a semester, it really kind of opened my eyes to, what graduate school could be like, because I was working alongside one of the PhD students. And so I got a good look into what his daily activities were like, and, what his schedule, what all of that entailed. And I saw that, and it just really clicked with me that I thought, okay, this is something I know I want to do. And so at that point, because I was in my last semester, it was a little too late to try and apply to graduate school. And after being in school, in college for 5 years, I thought I probably could use a little breather here. So I decided to go and work for a year with the intent on only working for 1 year and then going back to school afterwards. So once I graduated from Vanderbilt, I went to a company called CDI Corporation in Cincinnati, Ohio. And they are an engineering contracting company in the aerospace sector, and most of their work is with GE Aviation. So when I started there, I was on the analysis team, doing all kinds of mechanical analysis, heat transfer, thermo, and just kind of getting the feel for what engineering was like out in industry. And that was a really good experience for me to get that 1 year of working. And towards the end of end of my year there, they put me up as the lead engineer on a project, where my responsibilities weren't necessarily on the analysis side, but I was in charge of managing the project, communicating with the customer, making sure all the team members knew what they were supposed to be doing, putting together reports and presentations. So it was more on the management side, and really just echoing what Richard said earlier, that, I mean, those skills you develop at Center, through that liberal arts education are extremely valuable. And you don't really realize it while you're at Center because everybody else is doing it too. But I noticed the same thing, even just going to Vanderbilt with the students that had just gone straight through mechanical engineering, that their presentation skills were not great. Sometimes it was just difficult to hold a conversation with somebody, or if you're working in a group and you have to write a report, and everybody's in charge of different sections. And so, you kind of read through everybody else's sections, and I'm reading through these sections and, what they've written. And I'm kind of thinking in the back of my head, like, how have you gotten to this point? And, you haven't developed your writing skills more. And so that's something at Center that you may not realize it now, but it's extremely useful. And I'm sure Richard can agree with me on this, that there is one huge aspect to engineering that a lot of people don't realize, I mean, yes, you have to be extremely technical and be able to solve problems and things like that, but being able to communicate and express an idea when you have that is so crucial, because if you have an idea, it could be a, world-changing idea, but if you can't communicate that to somebody else, then that idea becomes useless. And so that's one skill that I encourage you guys to work on while you're there. And that really benefited me, especially in my job, just being able to communicate with somebody else next to me, especially as a contracting company, when somebody comes to you and tells you that, they have a project that they want you to work on. Your responsibility is to make sure that you have all the necessary information that you need to do the project in the way that they want it done. So if you guys aren't on the same page and you do the project one way and they say, well, we actually wanted it done this way, then you have to go back, redo the whole thing, and that just takes so much more time and money. So being able to communicate with the customer, or just communicate with your peers, so that everybody's on the same page. I mean, that is one crucial skill that most engineers I've found that they do not have, and that I think anybody going through Center, interested in the 3-2 program, that's a skill that you'll develop that will set you apart from other people. So I'll just kind of move into my graduate work right now. So I'm starting my second year at Ohio State. For those of you who don't know where Ohio State is, it's in Columbus, Ohio. And I'm working on my PhD in mechanical engineering. And during my first year, I was a TA. And now I'm a GRA, so Graduate Research Associate. And I work at the Center for Automotive Research. And my area of research is in electrochemical modeling and characterization. So just kind of in a nutshell, really quick, what that entails is taking the equations that essentially govern electrochemical processes. So that would be batteries or fuel cells, and understanding how the ions kind of transfer back and forth between electrodes, and being able to take those equations that govern that system and put them into a model that can be then used as part of a battery cell, then a battery pack, and then fully implemented into a hybrid electric vehicle or a just purely electric vehicle. And just some of the current projects I'm working on right now. I'm currently the only one working on this project where we are modeling an entire fuel cell bus. So I think that kind of pretty much speaks for itself. But the customer we're working with, they want us to run all types of simulations to change the parameters, such as like the size of the fuel cell, size of the battery pack, things like that, and seeing the effects that it has on the bus to see if what the buses they're using currently, if they're using the optimal set of parameters for that bus. And then another project I'm kind of just assisting on right now is it's a joint project with other universities, such as University of Akron, Toledo, and then I think Case Western, and then NASA is also, I think they are ultimately the customer in this project. And so this is testing and modeling lithium-ion batteries with advanced silicon anodes. I think the ultimate goal is for like deep space applications, just essentially trying to develop longer lasting batteries, for deep space probes and satellites and things like that. So that's kind of my background up to now. I obviously don't have near the experience that Richard does. But just a couple key points. I already talked about the presentation skills, just to, echo what Richard said earlier. And then I think, I'm not sure I'm trying to remember what kind of computer science classes that Center offers, but developing skills and programs such as like MATLAB or any 3D modeling skills, I mean, those are, if you can somehow do that, I don't know, if they've added any classes, added any classes in that, but that was probably my biggest, I would say, if there was any disadvantage of doing following the path that I took, that was probably the biggest disadvantage when I switched from physics to engineering, jumping in with all these kids who had been in engineering for 3 years already, or 2 or 3 years. My computer skills were just not nearly, where they needed to be. I mean, they are now. I mean, after a couple years working on it. But if any experience at all you can get while you're at center is going to benefit you greatly. And then I kind of had to laugh. Richard did the exact same thing I did, is taking, statics and dynamics as summer classes. And, it's funny, you jump into those classes after essentially, pretty close to finishing a physics major, and it's, just remarkably easy. I think I got like 100 on one of my tests, and I thought to myself, my God, if I ever got 100 on a test at center, I don't know what I would have done. But yeah, I mean, I think center prepares you very well for not just making that next step in the 3-2 program, but even beyond that. And just like Richard did, I actually found Vanderbilt to be significantly easier than center. And I even told a couple of my professors that when they were asking, where's center college, and I had to explain the whole program that I went through, and I told them Vanderbilt's easier, and I think that just speaks to the level that center does in preparing you, and especially for those of you who have had Dr. Nizer, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and the kind of work that he does. So yeah, I'll wrap it up, and then if you guys have any questions for us, I think that's the next step.
This is your chance. You got 2 professionals in the room. Questions?
Richard, I have a question.
Sure.
Did you say you do environmental engineering?
Yes, I did. I'm an environmental engineer. Yes.
Is there a difference? I don't know much about that. That's why I was obviously came to this. But is there a difference between that and civil engineering?
Yeah, more so nowadays than in the past. Yes,
civil.
So I'll share with you what that is. If you take a big step back on engineering, we learn a lot about the natural world, and that's important. But if you look around you, they've measured this, about 95% of what you do in your day is in an engineered system. I mean, you're in an engineered system right now. There's HVAC, that's kind of engineering, your structural engineers, all that. Civils, which I don't really do, have more to do with a subdivision that would be geotechnical. So they look at when you build a foundation on something, will that foundation hold up? There are transportation engineers inside that, so how do the stoplights all work? How do you get traffic to move correctly? A lot of civils do stormwater, and I do some of this sort of work where nitrogen and phosphorus are nutrients, and especially down here in Florida, it can cause algal blooms and problems. And our Lake Okeechobee, if you haven't heard about that, is a big problem every year. So nutrients, I actually, that's a form kind of in my mind of environmental. It's stormwater is how to design a stormwater pond, but the environmental part is how do you get the nutrients out so they don't get in the waterways. Civils also do land design, so the drainage on a house, how the house sits on the lot, that sort of stuff. The structurals, buildings, and beams. Environmental, though, I spent my career in cleaning up hazardous waste. If somebody spilled chemicals in the environment, my job was to figure out how to use basically microbiology and chemistry to do it in situ, how to set the subsurface environment in such a way that the different chemicals somebody's released in the environment can be remediated into non-toxic stuff. So I think of civils as land design, trying to get land to where it's you can build a home on it so the drainage is right, transportation, geotechnical, and structural. Environmental, we're off on the corner. We're more microbiology, chemistry, those sorts of things where you're talking about fate and transport, of chemicals, 3D modeling, that sort of stuff. Does that help?
Yeah. Thank you for clearing that up. That definitely clears some things up. Thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead. No. Daniel, you said you were studying automotive engineering, specifically working with like lithium ion batteries and fuel cell bus project. What are the other opportunities, like specific things you can study under specifically automotive engineering at Ohio State?
Yes, that's a great question. I'm not trying to be a spokesperson here for Ohio State, but the Center for Automotive Research here is one of the top automotive research facilities in the country, if not the best, in terms of the facilities, the professors they have here, the types of research that's going on. So under automotive, I mean, yeah, it's such a wide range of things you can do. I know that there are a lot of opportunities here in terms of like powertrain dynamics. I'm actually taking a class right now in powertrain dynamics and engine modeling. I know there's a lot with that. And I mean, even just getting involved in a lot of the sports teams that are here, like the automotive sports teams that they have, like Formula SAE. If you want to watch some really cool videos, look up the Buckeye Bullet. That just broke the world land speed record for an electric vehicle at it was 340 or it was, I think, the mid 300s miles per hour. Just recently did that. But yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things in automotive engineering that you can get into in terms of, especially on the engine side. Just modeling combustion processes and engine dynamics, and even up to full scale like vehicle models and things like that. And I know here at the facility we have like a testing dyno where you can put the vehicle on there and run it at different speeds, and we have several engine test cells. And then I think we are partnered with Honda out in Marysville. I think there's actually a picture behind me of a
Test track.
a test track that's here in Ohio that I think our students can use. So yeah, really in anything in automotive engineering you can think of, we have it here at Ohio State. So
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a question for you guys. Obviously you guys both went to the higher end of higher education. You've got a PhD and Danny's working on that. And I've always had the idea that you could do quite well in engineering even if you didn't have an advanced degree, and that related more to teaching and research. Could y'all speak to the opportunity if you didn't want to go on and get a graduate degree?
Okay, sure. Well, I guess in my field, yeah, most people do not have PhDs, and you don't do a PhD for the money. I don't think it's because you're passionate about something. A lot of people in my field, though, do have master's degrees. It's a pretty, not in the older days. I'm older, but even older than I am. It's not as common. But nowadays, I think most people do get a master's degree. It's usually a 1 or 2 year degree, so it's not as onerous as a PhD. I think you wouldn't really need a PhD to work in my field on everyday stuff. And I just wanted to work on kind of things that were a little bit more technically challenging and that sort of thing. But most people get a bachelor's or a master's, and they do quite well for themselves. My other 2 partners in the firm, they both had master's degrees. So I think there were only maybe 5 or 6 of us out of 270 that had PhDs. There were quite a few masters and a lot of bachelors. But no, you could have a great career with a bachelor's degree, 5 years, in general engineering, it pays reasonably well, and you get in the right market and you're passionate about it. What you'll find is you can do very well.
Okay. Did you want to speak to that in mechanical engineering, or is it pretty general for engineering?
yeah, I mean, in my experience from I mean, just from what I've heard from other people, especially the people that I worked with, I think what Richard said, I think that kind of covers all aspects of engineering, at least in my knowledge. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. You first.
Okay. So I wonder because when I tell my friends like I study physics, like they have this general idea that physics is a dead science, and I'm just curious from your I disagree with that. Like I'm just curious from your experience as an engineer. At one point you find physics as very like useful tool in terms of research. Is there any specific project and like things that can connect modern physics research to your current engineering project?
Okay, so I think physics was very useful. Engineering, every branch of engineering is basically the applied branch of some form of physics in my mind. So if you're talking about engineering, you're talking about applied physics, really. And so we just round things and put a safety factor in. But other than that, the rest of this stuff is all the basis is right there. Just in my everyday life, it was cool having a physics degree because you could talk about modern physics course that I don't know if they still have it or not, but you're talking about some pretty cool how the universe works type stuff. There's a cool factor in that. And then all the other things are just, you're training your brain to be, I think a lot of people misunderstand about physics, creative critical thinking. You have to be very logical about things, but you can also be very creative. And I think people forget the creative side of these things. And I think engineering allows you to be very creative, but the physics degree alone, I liked having a physics degree. I saw from trying to fix clogs in sinks or whatever else, the physics and engineering both lend themselves to understanding more about how your everyday world works and having insights into things like that. Danny, what was your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. I mean, especially in the research that I'm doing with batteries. I'm dealing a lot with chemistry and trying to understand how the ions, transport back and forth. And I mean, that's physics right there. I mean, directly. So, I mean, granted, not all mechanical engineering is that, detailed. But yeah, I mean, I think the skills you learn going through the physics major in terms of problem solving and the critical thinking, I mean, I just think those are invaluable. And really, I think it kind of gives you a better fundamental understanding of what's going on compared to other people that just went through engineering and didn't have that more advanced physics background that you are getting right now at Center. So yeah, I mean, I think it will really, you may not see it right now, but you'll definitely see the benefits as you progress through your career.
Thank you.
Okay.
Guys, one question I had was about professional licensure. Like what percentage of environmental mechanical engineers go on to get that PE license? What is it useful for? Those kinds of questions.
Why don't you go first this time, Danny?
Okay, yeah. So I think in mechanical, it's probably not as common to get a professional licensing or PE license as they call it. I think it's really dependent on what you are doing. I think that it's very job to job dependent. So I think in mechanical it's not that common, but I think in areas such as like civil, I think almost any civil engineer has to have a PE license. So it really depends on the job you have and in what field of engineering you're working. So, but one thing I will, I'll add this to as a recommendation. As a lot of engineering schools will give you the opportunity to take the FE exam while you're still in school, and it comes at a discounted price. And I think it's a 1-day test, but it's like 8 hours, and there's two sections. So that's something. It's if you decided, to go into engineering, I would highly recommend just taking that test, because that is the first step to becoming to attaining your PE license. And I think, Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, I think is what you have to have 3 years of work experience, and then
It's 4 if you have a bachelor's, 3 if
okay.
you have a master's, and 2 if you have a PhD.
Okay. Yeah. So taking that FE exam while you're still while you're still an undergrad is, I think, just do it. I mean, even if you decide not to use it later, at least you have that in your back pocket. So then you don't have to go back and take the test to, start that process to getting your PE license. So especially when that information is so fresh in your mind.
Yeah, I agree with everything Dan just said. If you need to submit something to the state, a state agency, you have to have a PE. So civils and environmentals, unless you work in industry or they work for the government, those people don't always have PEs. But everybody who works that submits things to the state, everybody I know has a PE. Usually in my field, it adds maybe $5,000 to $10,000 a year to your salary. And I can't agree. Danny's dead on. It's hard. It gets harder the further away you get from school. So you might as well take it, because you never know what the world can throw at you, and you may have to submit things to the state someday. But again, if you have to submit to the state, you absolutely have to have one. It's a big difference in your pay. If you're in industry or government where you're not submitting things directly to the state, I don't think you have to have it.
Just to add one more thing to that. This is more of like a niche thing, if anybody's interested in this at all. My dad he's an attorney, and so if, occasionally he'll deal with cases. I think he's actually dealing with a case right now in Columbus over a bridge. So if you want to be an expert witness, in legal matters, I think you would have to have a PE license to be able to go up on the stand and testify in a case, if that's something anybody's interested in doing.
Yeah, I do quite a bit of expert witness work, and every credential you have helps you be certified as an expert. I use my PE on the stand as well, and that's a place you can get into a lot of. I represented the government of Canada a while back on a $1 billion lawsuit, and yeah, they looked at all my credentials to make sure and that was a big part of it too. Yeah, expert witness, every credential you can get, any board certification you get, anything like that makes a big difference. And an expert witness is just your opinion, so it's kind of neat work.
One kind of follow-up on that. So if in some fields the PE license is not necessary, could you have gone to graduate work in engineering, so mechanical engineer for a master's or a PhD, without having had the bachelor's experience? That is, could you have gone directly from your physics major at Center into graduate work in engineering?
I've seen people do that at MIT. I saw several people, but they basically have to go back and pick up a bunch of courses. So it sort of seems like you can do that, but the truth is, no, it takes another 1.5 years or so to go back. You have to go pick up a bunch of extra courses. And so I knew somebody with, I think, a geology degree from Colby College, which is a liberal arts school, and she had to go back and pick up, I think, about 1.5 years to meet all the requirements. So sort of, yeah, you can, but the truth is you're going back to pick up you won't go in the same time frame, at least in my experience. You'll have to pick up some extra courses in order to get straight in with a physics degree to go to a master's degree. And to get PE licensure, you have to have gone to an ABET accredited program. So but if you don't need licensure, maybe it's not as important, but I think you have to have a lot of core courses to get an engineering degree, and it's part of the ABET curriculum. I think that's right.
Yeah, that's what I've seen as well. When I was starting at Ohio State and going through all the orientation stuff, there were a handful of students who had physics, only physics degrees, bachelor degrees, and they were starting graduate school in mechanical engineering. And I know they had to take a couple extra courses before actually really getting into the graduate work.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Richard and Dave, thank you so much for doing this. This was great.
All right. Yeah.